Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino, and I am here with our other host, Joe LaVacca. And we also have a special guest here today, Dr. Jen Perez. She is a chiropractor, the co-founder of Gait. And fun fact, even though she's a chiropractor, she does specialize in foot and ankle, and that is where we'll be talking today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Always, whenever I tell people I'm a chiropractor, they're like, "Oh, I got this neck thing going on," right? And I'm like, "Ooh, plot twist for you. I'm actually specializing from the ground up and looking at walking mechanics, foot and ankle." So I'm excited to dive in. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Well, Jen, that's where you have the double referral source, because they can just be like, I have the perfect person for you. My wonderful husband will look at the neck and the spine and everything else. So
shoulder. He's good at
you got it
shoulder.
like literally covered head to toe. No matter what somebody comes up to you at a party or a holiday event, you know you can help them. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I usually just shove him his way. I'm like, yeah, I'm off the clock, but Mark likes to help people off the clock.
So I know a lot of people know you from Gait, as you were saying. Why don't you give us a little insight into what Gait is, in case people have been living under a rock, and maybe even talk a little bit about your practice now that we brought Mark up too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to just interject 1 second, because we always start this, Joe, and then we get into our conversation, but we have one very important question we have to ask before you lead into this. What's how you take your coffee?
Well, I thought we usually do that one before the first one.
We do, but I just feel like that way just interrupts the flow of conversation. So we'll take that and then go right into it.
Mug is how I take it. I am a vanilla latte girl through and through, but I actually am on Whole30 right now. So my lame coffee right now is coffee with unsweetened coconut milk. And it makes me sad, but it gives me energy.
Okay. So it's robbing you of all joy, but it fits your current goals.
It does.
Vanilla latte. All right. Do you switch that up for the season? Would you do like a pumpkin spice latte or like a gingerbread latte? What are we thinking of with flavors?
I continuously try flavors and regret it. And then I'm like, I should have just got a freaking vanilla latte. So I'm going to stick with vanilla latte for my answer today.
All right.
There you go.
All right. Very good. Joe has an entire coffee project going on over there. He's got cold brew. He's got all these different machines. It's a very fancy setup down there in North Carolina.
I do have a Breville setup. So I've got the little espresso maker and the grinder, and
there you go.
I actually make my own lattes, and I do throw some honey in there. So
is that a latte, Joe?
That is iced latte. No flavor though for me.
I've been saying this for probably 3 years. I need to step up my coffee game. I'm just scared. I'm just scared to do it by myself. That's it. I'll say it. I'll say it here on the podcast. I'm scared to do it alone. I don't want to mess it up.
Scared of something.
Yeah, I don't want to mess it up. So that's why when I get some fancy, I'll go to the coffee shop. I'll go to Starbucks. I'll go somewhere, because I know it'll at least be consistent, albeit cost me $9 in New York City.
Yeah. That's
also why I started making my lattes at home.
Yep. Precisely.
All right. Well, that is probably the most important question, Jen. Now, why don't you throw us a little bit of insight into how people know you through Gait, and then again, speak to your in-person practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gait, we are a global education company. So Dr. Courtney Conley and myself, we started Gait basically trying to get the word out there that there's more that you could do for your feet than just shoving support underneath them and taking on kind of passive treatments. And we really wanted to empower people that they could improve their physical health from the ground up. So Gait is an education company, and we started doing virtual consultations, and then we came out with a course all about your feet. And then we really learned that people wanted to learn, and not only people who wanted to learn about themselves, but practitioners who really hadn't been taught this stuff in school, very surprisingly, wanted to learn more about the biomechanics of the lower extremity and how they could be better treating their patients. And so now we have a whole array of courses and programs. We teach in-person certifications, and we actually came out with our own product line as well because we kept recommending the same simple tools to improve your foot health or your lower body health, really. And so that is kind of the gist of Gait Happens. We have free information all over the place. We've got blogs on the website. We've got thousands of posts on Instagram, YouTube, you name it. The only place that we're really not is TikTok. We just haven't bit that bullet yet, but TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And then I also see patients in person at my practice with my husband. So we have a practice called Kinetic Chiropractic in Lafayette, Colorado. And it's a really chill, really awesome practice. We love it because we do longer one-on-one appointments. We've got a nice little gym set up. And so we get to spend more time with our patients. My favorite thing about what we do is we treat every person as an individual. If you walk in and you say, I have plantar fasciitis, you are not going to get the same treatment plan as the last 10 people who had plantar fasciitis. And the reason for that is because we base everything in biomechanics. So the way that I look at things is through the lens of why is that tissue being overstressed? And then we address that rather than being like A equals B. You have plantar fasciitis, you're going to go roll your foot on a frozen water bottle. You're going to stretch your calves. I don't like protocols. I like biomechanics and I like treating the person in front of me. So that's my favorite part across the board is getting to nerd out on that kind of stuff.
Well, I know somewhere you just made Dr. Courtney Conley smile as well. So very nice, Jen. Very nice. Joe, do you want to take the first question or should I?
Oh, you can take it.
All
You
right.
already got it. You got the floor.
All right. Jen, so
Joe.
many of us in the healthcare field get into this space because of prior injury pain. A lot of times our patients don't hear that side of the story. So I was wondering if you would be willing to share your pain experience or maybe past injury experience that has shaped you not only as a person and maybe the way that you view pain. I know it's, as you said, through biomechanics and stuff, but how has it shaped you as a person and a professional?
So I feel seen and attacked by this question. Because it's so true. All of us really, I shouldn't say all of us, but a lot of us get into doing what we do because we have passion for it, because we have personal experience. And I am no exception to the rule. Surprisingly, though, my pain was not lower body. I actually had something called frozen shoulder in both shoulders for 6 years at 18. So you guys both know how bizarre that sounds. So for those listening, frozen shoulder is when your shoulders literally lock up. And so mine didn't ever fully freeze, but I could only get to 90 degrees. I couldn't raise my arms above 90 degrees starting at 18 until 24 on both sides. So imagine trying to wash your hair or reach for a cup. It's very painful. It's very frustrating. And it sucked. And so that was a big part of my journey, was trying to get through that, looking for resources. So this all started, I was a softball player for my whole life. Like, started at 4, went to D1 in college. And basically, as we know, with pain, there's more than the physical. And I had a bad breakup with softball, And when I decided I want to not work out for 6 months so I can lose all of my muscle mass so I can entirely forget this part of my life, my shoulders went, oh, good, because you're going to forget your shoulders too. And that was when the frozen shoulder started. And so pulling back those layers of the physical, the emotional, all of those things that I had to work through, I basically started to really see progress when I was in chiropractic school. And I started investigating things other than just the regular curriculum because I wasn't getting as thorough of an education around shoulder mechanics and more sports injury kind of stuff that I really wanted to see. So I started investigating. I started taking other courses like SFMA and all these different functional movement things. And then I went to a rock tape course and I wanted to learn how to tape shoulders because I heard that kinesiology tape was great for injury and it was going to be great. And this, I promise I'm almost done with my long story, but this is where I found Dr. Courtney Conley. Because Dr. Courtney Conley was the teacher of that rock tape course. And lo and behold, the entire time I'm at this course trying to learn how to tape my own shoulders, because I want to also specialize in throwing athletes so no one else has to deal with what I dealt with, she keeps talking about feet.
Yeah, so annoying.
no one cares about feet. Stop talking about feet. And by the end of the 2 days, I was like, why is no one talking about feet? The biomechanical implications that our feet have on how we move, they're the foundation of everything. No one is talking about this. And my biomechanics nerd brain won over my personal journey brain. And that was how I really pivoted into the lower extremity.
That's a fun story. And I will say, taking a rock tape course was how I met Joe.
See?
So a fun
Rock tape
fact
is
there.
the universe, right?
And second, Joe is the exception to the rule of being injured and getting into PT because he liked his PT's sports car, and like that kind of pushed him into PT. So it was a lifestyle thing for Joe, not I was injured.
Which is why I've still been trying to retire before 40. Right? I was like, well, sweet. Like, this is going to be an easy cash out for Joe. Just become a PT for a few years and then just ride the wave. But it hasn't happened yet.
Mm-mm. Anyway, I have a real question for you, Jen. I mean, you keep talking about biomechanics here, and you mentioned earlier, the lens you look through to figure out what's happening with the tissue, why it might be injured. Maybe go into that a little bit deeper. What kind of things, or maybe some common themes that you see from a biomechanical standpoint that might lead to certain common injuries that we might see?
Yeah, it's a great question. The foot is actually a really complex structure. Fun fact, a lot of modern engineering is like physical structural engineering was based on the foot because Leonardo da Vinci was also obsessed with the foot. So things like pulleys and things like that started at the foot. Fun fact. But to simplify the foot, I've got my nerdy models here for you too. So anyone
All right.
make sure you head to YouTube or wherever you can watch me because I will show on my models. But there are 4 layers of muscle in the foot. So the foot was designed to be very, very strong. This is my favorite model that I use with my patients because you can see all the different layers that live inside the foot. The number one question that I get from people is, well, how do you strengthen your foot? Shouldn't it just be strong? Especially for people that are active. I work with a lot of athletes that are, you know, ultra runners, for example. And to answer your question, one of the common themes that I see is that their feet are not strong. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too far, but we can talk about shoes at some point, okay? Because I do think shoes play a role in that equation. But 2 things that I would focus on to keep a foot healthy and 2 things that I see as common themes as to why we see pain at the foot is a lack of strength, or we should keep our feet strong to be healthy. And then on the flip side of that is mobility. We have so many joints. We have 33 joints in our foot. So it's built with all of these tiny little bones that articulate and move and bend and twist so that when we're walking, we can adapt to different surfaces. And so often we don't let our feet move. We put them into shoes that are really stiff and things like that so that our foot stays in one position. And the golden rule of the musculoskeletal system is use it or lose it. So that goes for strength. If I'm not using the muscles, they're not going to be strong. It also goes for mobility. If I'm not challenging my foot and making it move and adapt, those joints can become stiff. And so oftentimes when I'm working with my patients, it comes down to a theme of either strength or mobility if the problem is at the foot. And I will also say that not every foot problem is a foot problem because we also have to look at the whole chain and how that's affecting the foot as well.
Follow up to that, Jen. When you mentioned both practices, right? So we have Gait Happens, we have Kinetic. You also mentioned that every kind of patient is tailored, right? And that's awesome to hear. When you first begin to have a patient, let's say they're not actually coming in for a foot issue, going back to the biomechanical conversation, and they have knee pain or hip pain, or heck, even low back pain, right? Do you ever try to convince them like, hey, we need to dose this back or we need to dose this knee? Or do you kind of dive right into the whole kinetic chain right off the bat? And if so, how do you convince them that their foot could help their knee or their back pain?
So it's a good question. I will tell you that I have a skewed answer because I have become known as the foot and gait specialist. So people do come to me with knee pain, hip pain, back pain, but usually they come to me already with an open mind that it might be coming from their feet. So I will throw that out there as I have a little bit of an easier time than a lot of other practitioners would because I'm the foot girl at this point. But before that became kind of what people sought out, I did have to have a lot of those conversations. And I did always incorporate the foot, whether they knew I was going to or not. So one of the ways that I like to have that conversation is I always am going to look locally at what's happening. So let's just say back pain, because that's kind of the furthest of what we talked about from the foot. So I will look at the back and say, again, is this a mobility issue? Is it a strength issue? How does our core control look? What's our breathing look like? I'm going to look local to the back to see what's happening. Are we talking about a herniated disc? Are we talking about something structural? All the whole 9 yards. I'm going to do my job here first. But then I will talk to the patient, and this is people have the hardest time talking to their patients, and I think we just forget that our patients are people too. And I say, okay, here's what we found from the top down. Okay. And I really like, Joe, you'll like this, but I use top down, bottom up with every single patient. Every single patient, my report of findings, I'm like, we have to look from the top down and we have to look from the bottom up. And so I'm going to say, here's what's happening from the top down when we look at your core and your spine and all these things. But we also need to take a look at what's happening from the bottom up, because our feet, our knees, our hips, they all are our foundation for how our spine is going to interact with movement. And so that gives me a window to start looking below the belt. And then I just see what I find. I don't go in with a bias of they are going to walk away with a foot exercise. But if I see in my assessment that some of the biggest, lowest hanging fruits they're showing up with 1 to 2 pounds of big toe strength when they should have 17 pounds of toe strength, or their ankle mobility is 0, so they can't get through their ankle and they're going to have to rob that motion from somewhere else. Things like that I see big, low hanging fruit, I'm going to tell them, so I want to work where your pain is, but I think there's a bigger issue going on that we need to address other things as well.
Thank you. I think that really goes in hand too, with just coming back to treating people like an ecosystem. A lot of times when I see people with back pain or knee pain or hip pain, they're just too sensitive to start loading and moving there. So what do I try to convince them? It's the same thing as you. It's like, well, what can we load? Can
Yep.
we still load your legs in a leg extension or a leg curl? Can we still have you do a seated shoulder press, a seated row? Because anything that we do that's going to make your system more resilient should make you more resilient. And then we can still trigger all those pain relieving hormones, and we can get to that empowerment conversation. You can start to realize, wow, I can do a lot of the things that I want to do in pain. I just have to be maybe a little patient, a little creative. So thank you for answering that.
Yes. Yeah. And you nailed that. That's so true, that the conversation needs to be around what can I do, not what can't I do. Right.
Mhm.
And that can be really frustrating too for the patient, because they want to be able to do the things that they normally can do. And so it's really hard to flip that and say, okay, I'm going to give you just a little story and then you can ask your next question. But I had a really good example of a patient. This is why I actually really don't like using pain as a marker with my patients, because it's so unreliable and so
Mhm.
multifactorial. And I had a patient, so she came in and we always set goals. On day one, we set goals. And, typically the first goal is, I want to run a marathon pain free, or I want to go back to doing all the things I love and never feel pain again. And I'm like, okay, we talk through that and talk through what realistic may look like. But okay, we can set that on the horizon. I want to look at baby step goals. So, what kind of activity are you doing right now and how does it feel? And then what would be something that would tell us we're moving in the right direction? So, with this particular patient, she was in so much pain that she couldn't even walk her dog. So, she was like, if I could walk 1 mile with my dog every day, I would be so happy. So, I write this down. I write it down word for word in their words. And this is exactly why, because on her third appointment, so it's been about 5 weeks, she comes back and I can tell she's upset. So I didn't know if something happened or what. And she comes back and she is angry at me. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, I'm just really frustrated. I don't feel like we're making progress. I went out on this 3 mile hike and I still had pain. So I let her finish. I let her say what she wanted to say. And I was like, okay, I totally hear that you're frustrated. I just want to kind of go back and get a pulse check of where we started and where we are now. And then let's gauge how our progress is going. Because I knew what her original goal was. And as soon as I read it in her words that she would be so happy if she could walk 1 mile with her dog. And that was only 5 weeks ago. And now she just went for a 3-mile hike. She was like, I said that? It's like pain just wipes away all memory. And this is why it's so important to write these things down and lay out, where are we now? Where do we want to be? It's so incredible.
No, I love that story. And I think we talk about this so many times in this podcast, how pain is I mean, obviously it's like a subjective experience. You feel it, it is what it is, but you have to have other ways of measuring if you're making progress or not. So on that note, we're talking about foot health here, foot pain here. Maybe we'll start with kind of like assessments. Like if someone was like, I don't know, they're dealing with some of these things, foot pain, or maybe they think their feet are involved. What are some like self-assessment things that someone can kind of go through to, figure out if their foot is involved, whether they should look at it more and focus on these characteristics?
Yeah, like simple kind of self-test they can do at home. Yeah. So this is going to sound pretty basic, but one of the easiest foundational things that you can do is single leg balance, right? You would be surprised how many times everybody, I'm not just talking about people who are over 65 or people who have had major surgeries. Everybody, when we get to single leg balance in the office, I'm like, okay, now I want you to balance on one foot. And they're like, oh, I suck at this. And it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at why. So it's going to test, obviously, we're looking at vestibular. So you have to keep that in mind too, because it's going to test your balance systems and your eyes. But from a foot perspective, it's going to test your ability to adapt to your weight shift. It's going to test your proprioception, so your sensory system in the bottom of your foot. It's also going to test your ankle strength and stability, and all the way up into the hip. So I'm looking at so many things with balance, but self-test would be, can you balance starting out for 30 seconds? I would love to see you balance for a minute on each foot. And then if that becomes easy, can you do it with your eyes closed? Because then you're taking away the visual system and relying more on vestibular and your feet. And so that's a really good self-check of, can I do this? And then if you can't, what's the why? Do a little self-check with yourself of like, does it feel like your ankle is unstable? Does it actually feel like your hip is kind of like pushing out to the side and that's what you can't control? Does it feel like you just can't feel the ground or your toes just don't really want to engage with the ground? Things like that. So that's a really good self-test, just like a status check. Then I would say 2 tests would be one for mobility and one for strength. I don't expect everyone to have a toe dynamometer at home to measure their toe strength, but there are things that you can do to test yourself at home. One of my favorites that I used to see a lot of patients virtually. And one of my favorite tests for my virtual patients to check in on their toe strength was to have them sit down. Even better if you have a friend that can help you with this. But if you sit in a chair and your friend is facing your feet, or if you're doing it on yourself, you just sit on the ground and then you put your foot on the ground, right? So I'm laughing because I just dropped a muscle. Here's my foot, right? It's on the ground. And then you take a business card or how about a Columbia gift card? Okay. So you take a business card or some kind of durable card and you put it under your big toe. And then you try to press your big toe into the ground as hard as you can. And you try to pull that card out. And your goal is that you're pressing so hard that you can't pull the card out. It's just a really good self-check of strength. So we do that for the big toe. And then we do that for the outer toes. And then you look at, number 1, did you get any cramping with that? Did the card slide right out and you really didn't have any resistance? Then that's a big indicator that we need to work on strength. And looking at differences not only between the big toe and the outer toes, but also from side to side. So maybe on the left foot, you're like, ooh, I actually did a good job. I couldn't get that card out. And then on the right side, you're like, whoa, that came right out. My right foot may not be as strong as my left foot. So in general, we're looking for enough resistance that we can't pull that card out. The big toe should be stronger than the outer toes. It's big for a reason. It's the big guns. It really does a lot of the work of the foot. So we do want a bigger, stronger big toe than the outer toes. So we have balance, we have strength, and then the last test would be mobility. Mobility is really tough to see when it comes to like actual midfoot mobility. It's really tough for people to see on themselves. But one of the things that works together with the foot is the ankle. So I would say doing an ankle mobility test would be a really good self-check as well. So if I was to stand facing a wall, okay, so here's my wall, here's my foot. if I'm standing facing the wall, if I stand about a hand's width away from the wall, that's approximately 4-ish inches. Okay. So now if I keep my heel down and I try to touch my knee to the wall, I should be able to touch my knee to the wall, right? So I'm a hand width away, keep my heel on the ground, touch my knee to the wall. If I can't get my knee to the wall, then I might have limited ankle mobility. And if I have limited ankle mobility, it could be coming from a restriction in the joint in the front of the ankle. So if you're feeling pinching in the front, it could come from tightness in the muscles in the back or the Achilles, anything on the backside here. It also can be if the foot doesn't get out of the way. So our foot, if we live, for example, with arches that are in a higher, more supinated position, in order to get into ankle dorsiflexion, we have to be able to pronate and lower that arch so that we can bend through the ankle. So again, if I find that I have limited ankle mobility, I want to look at why. So did I feel stretching in the back? Maybe I should look at stretching my calves. Did I feel pinching in the front? Well, think about lowering that arch a little bit, letting your foot sink into the ground, and then try the test again. And if you find that the test got better or more comfortable, then looking at foot mobility might be something that we need to work on.
Those are great, Jen. Very practical, simple.
Mhm.
And I do the credit card or the business card one a lot. And I just did it with somebody a couple of days ago who's been having kind of persistent foot pain, which is related to maybe a neuroma, or so he was, sort of told or diagnosed with. And it was interesting to just watch his face as his right foot, the one that doesn't have pain, he's like just sitting there, he's got it. And then watching his left foot as I just kind of easily slide it away. And he's like, I've been to 15 different providers, and all I've done was orthotics and calf raises and all this other stuff, and I still having pain. He's like, that seems like something to work on. And I'm like, maybe, yeah. Why don't we just add it to the list? And I think a lot of these simple tests, 30 or 60 seconds of balance is tough, especially with your eyes closed. But that gives
Mhm.
you maybe a 2, 3, 4 week progression to start working on things. Strength training for the foot or any muscle, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to see change or progress. And what I'm coming to here is that a lot of these assessments, although simple, I think just re-inspire people and give them hope. Like, wow, I stood on my leg for 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and the doctor dismissed me, or the previous PT was like, balance looks great. There's no way I can last 30 seconds or 60 seconds, right? So sometimes it's just clinician patience, keep it simple. So that's what I really
Mhm.
appreciate about those tests for sure.
Yeah. And it gives them the cool thing too is when you can make a change in that test with just some simple cueing. So taking balance, for example, and I encourage anyone listening to try this while we're talking about it. But if you tried the balance and you felt like really unstable, let's say you made it 5, 6 seconds and you're like, oh, I got to put my other foot down. Try it again, but this time before you balance, I want you to lift up your toes. I want you to try to spread them out wide. Even if your toes aren't listening to you, that's a whole different conversation of that brain foot connection. Okay. But keep trying to spread your toes and then lower the toes down to the ground and just keep them engaged. I'm not gripping for dear life. I'm not curling my toes. I'm just pressing my toes flat into the ground. And now I encourage you to try balancing again and see if that makes a difference. And 9 times out of 10,
Mhm.
gets significantly better just by actually interfacing with the ground. And it's amazing how much our feet are on the ground, but we're not actually interfacing with.
There's a lot of ways that I think we could probably shoot into the next question. But I think maybe with these assessments, it's looking at the overall health of the foot. Like you said, there's a strength test, there's a mobility test, there's a balance test, right? All these kind of three things coming together. What we also sort of see a lot is patients think that if their foot is flat, that's a problem. If their foot's too high, it's a problem. If it's too mobile at the joint of the ankle, it's a problem. If it's too limited, what does actually foot health mean to you? How should patients think about it? Because I don't think a flat foot is an unhealthy foot, just like I don't think a high arch foot is an unhealthy foot. So how can patients reframe this idea of foot health?
That's such a good question. Let me start by saying this. So foot health is more than musculoskeletal health, right? So we also have to keep in mind that there's nerves in our feet. So nerve health, looking at cardiovascular health, especially with things like a cardiovascular deficiency, we can see skin changes, discoloration, flake, things like that. And there's also nail health. So looking at, as gross as it is, toe fungus is a thing. So that's also things that I will bring to attention of my patients. Even though I don't treat those things, a lot of times they don't realize that they're going on and that they can be painful and be contributing to other pain that they're having. So I just want to add that kind of layer to the foot health conversation. But when it comes to the structure or the musculoskeletal system of the foot, you're absolutely right. There has been a kind of fallacy for decades, decades, that a flat foot is a problem, a high arch is a problem. And I challenge you, and this is going to seem like oversimplified, but I challenge you to say, is being short a problem? Is being tall a problem? We have different bodies and we exist in different ways, and our feet are no exception to that. In fact, we showed arch variation in height. Dr. Courtney Conley will also love this. We have shown variation in arch height since Lucy. Australopithecus afarensis. That is how long, millions of years, we have had variation in arch height, and yet we still demonize it. And so I want to just peel that layer back and say, you are not broken because you have flat feet, and you are not broken because you have high arches, and you are not perfect if you have that beautiful mid-height arch either. It's all about how the foot functions. So going back to those tests, looking at how strong is it? How good is our balance? How is our mobility? Mobility being at the ankle, but also that midfoot. Can we pronate and supinate? The foot, when we're using our feet, when we're walking, running, jumping, really the bottom of the foot, think of it like a trampoline. It actually lowers and springs, lowers and springs. So if I have this really high arch that doesn't ever pronate, right? Or a mid-height arch that doesn't ever pronate, my trampoline is not going anywhere, right? I can't jump from here. I have to lower first before I go up. That's what makes efficiency. That's what makes us move forward when we're walking. So having the mobility to go through those ranges of motion, and then having the strength would be the tension of that trampoline. The stronger the foot, the springier the trampoline. But nobody likes a sloppy trampoline, right? So that's really what I look at when it comes to the foot health from a musculoskeletal perspective. Is, are my joints all moving well? Is my big toe moving well? Is my ankle moving well? Cool. How's our strength? And then, like you said, if you see that low hanging fruit of this foot is significantly stronger than that foot, or across the board, we could use significantly more strength. It's amazing the things that people come back and say that improving their foot strength has changed. Not only things like their balance and their pain of their feet, knees, hips, back, but really overall, they're like, I feel more grounded. I feel like I can run faster, longer because I have more pop in my step, things like that. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And I think certain joints just get these like bad reputations for certain movements, positions. The back has anterior and posterior tilting. If you're in one of those, your back's going to explode. Your life is ruined. You need to go figure that part out. But I think it always comes down to, and can you, maybe you may be kind of biased to one position, but can you access the other position? If you can
Exactly.
have full range of motion and move things throughout, you're going to be fine
My
in those
husband is my
regards.
favorite example of, because he has the world's like flattest foot. Actually, I have seen 2 feet flatter than his, and I'm a foot specialist. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've only seen 2 feet flatter than his. But I use his footprint as an example all the time, because that's the thing, is people think they have flat feet, and they actually don't. And I do a pedograph, so like an ink print of people's feet as part of my assessment, and then I hold up their footprint that has like this beautiful arch to it, and then I hold up Mark's footprint that looks like just literally stamped to the bottom of a giant foot. And I'm like, okay, do you see the difference? And so I already peel back that layer by saying, even if having flat feet was a problem, you don't have flat feet. But let's also talk about how the function of the foot matters.
I like that. And so I think, and Joe, if you have any questions before we dive towards that, I do want to spend some time on like orthotics and footwear, and especially like this kind of goes with this conversation with if someone does have a flat foot or a high arch and maybe they have some hard time getting in and out of positions. When do you see, like, at what point would you say an orthotic is good for somebody? When should they really kind of take this consideration or move through that? Because I feel like it's like a blanket thing. They go to see a podiatrist and it's like, oh yeah, foot pain. Okay, well, I'm going to make you an orthotic. So maybe we can dive that way. Unless Joe, you have other questions before we go that way.
Cool. I am prepared. I've got all the things. I don't have an orthotic, ironically. But first, I will say there's a movement within podiatry called natural podiatry that they are moving towards adding in more biomechanics and strength, which I'm really excited to see. So just throwing that out there. But in general, let's talk about shoes first, and then let's talk about orthotics. Does that work? Yeah. When it comes to shoes, your shoe should protect you from your environment. So whether that's like not stepping on glass or other scary things, protecting you from the cold if it's cold outside, things like that. Your shoe should protect your foot, but it should not inhibit your foot. It should not restrict its movement. So in an ideal world, right, if we started this when people were babies and allowed the foot to move and never put it in something that restricted it, I think the majority of symptoms that we see now wouldn't exist or would be much less common. Because our foot, like I've talked about multiple times, is complex, it's strong, it's mobile, it's made to adapt to all these different things. And when we put something on that interferes with the function, that's when things start to go down the wrong way, essentially. So let me talk about what that means. One of the things that is absolutely non-negotiable when it comes to shoes, and this is, where function and fashion kind of collide a little bit, but when you look at the foot, right? Granted, my foot model here has seen better days, but the toes should be the widest part of our foot. When you look at a shoe, most modern day footwear, what's the widest part of these shoes? Can you see them? Do one at a time.
Not the toes, Jen.
Not the toes, the ball of the foot, right? The ball of the foot, where the joints where the toes meet the foot, is typically the widest. Now, the problem with this is when my foot is inside that shoe, it's doing this. It's bringing my toes together. Okay. So now, not only are my toes not in proper alignment with the bones behind them, the metatarsals. So imagine you take a door and you hang it crooked, and then you open and close that door 10,000 times per day. How long is that door going to last? How long are those hinges going to last? This is why things start to get really angry and why the forefoot, the front of the foot, is where the majority of symptoms happen at the foot. So already we're compromising just the alignment. Then you take that to the whole foot. If you imagine the foot as a tripod, so 3 stable legs, right? If I sweep the big toe, which we already talked about is one of the major stabilizers of the foot. If I sweep the big toe to the side, what immediately happens to my tripod, if I take one leg away, which way does it fall? It falls towards the missing leg. So now, what do you know? I have quote unquote overpronation that I can't control because I took away one of the major stabilizers of the arch. So this alone is one of the things that baffles me, because we have shoes that are moving the big toe to the side, and then they're like, yeah, we have arch support, because they need to build the arch back up because they took away the stability in the first place. So that's one of the things that I look for in footwear. Absolutely has to have a wide toe box. The toes have to be able to splay. Now, going into the orthotic conversation and the support conversation, there is a time and place. I am not anti-orthotic. I'm not going to demonize orthotics. They are a tool that has been created to help people. And I think that's wonderful. I, however, think they are overprescribed. And I think most people should have an exit strategy. You were to, let's go back to the back pain, right? If you were in excruciating back pain and I was like, you need to wear this back brace because you can't even walk around the grocery store right now, would you wear the back brace? Sure. I had a back brace when I was in college, right? Along with my frozen shoulder, I had such bad back pain because I couldn't use my shoulder. So I was using my back for everything, that I was in a back brace and I used it. Am I still using it now? No, because I built up the strength and the mobility and I addressed the real problem because my back was just a victim. But it's a tool that helps us keep moving, especially when things are in pain. So I think we need to flip our view on orthotics to something like a back brace or a crutch. It's something that allows us to keep moving, but we need to be building a long-lasting plan, whether that's strength, mobility, mechanics, whatever it may be, so that we can get out of it, so that we can stop using it and stop relying on it. Because the flip side of that is what we have seen, and there was a research study, I believe it came out in 2021, that showed that long-term use of orthotics decreases muscle size in your feet. And that should be like common sense, right? If the orthotic is doing the work for you, your foot doesn't have to do the work. If you don't use it, you lose it. But now we're actually seeing that in studies that are showing, yes, long-term use of support is doing the work for you, and you're going to see a shrink in the muscle size. And so that's my kind of bit on orthotics, is use them if they're needed to keep you moving. Because we know that movement is not only empowering, and the psychological benefits of movement and the physical benefits of movement, we have to be able to keep moving. So use the tools that will keep you moving, but have an exit strategy. What's the long-term plan to no longer use this? And then I'm going to add my tiny little asterisk. The exception to this is when there is a structural anomaly at the foot, because there are people that have clubfoot. There are people that have something called forefoot varus. There are structural changes at the foot that can cause pain or discomfort either at the foot or up the chain. And those are cases, they're very few, but those are cases where I do look at long-term orthotic use so that we can address the mechanics, because we have to take into account the whole equation.
Yeah, Jen, I love that. And I often find that when people come into the clinic and they're asking about the orthotic conversation, a lot of people are starting to feel bad. I don't want to use the orthotics. I don't want to become reliant on them. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But every time I try to go to walk, I can't, because I'm limited by pain or by swelling or by anything else. The person that we've referenced a lot, I know you guys have had him on your Gait Guru sort of call, is Greg Lehman. Greg Lehman's, sort of famous phrase is calm shit down, build it back up. And I think just so many people have it backwards, like to use these tools as a way to access movement, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5 months, do it. It's way better, I usually tell people, to take your 5,000 steps, your 10,000 steps with your orthotic than to take a couple of hundred without it. And that load through the foot, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, should not deter all the muscle and deterioration or atrophy. And I know that research that you're referencing, maybe you can speak to just like a hypothetical, right? If people were using the orthotics that way, to go out and walk 10,000 steps or go hike, do you think those results would have been the same? And I don't know actually how they looked at that study, if they monitored people's steps per day and then compared them to muscle loss.
Yeah.
Because I don't know the details probably as well as you do there.
Yeah. It's actually been a minute since I looked at the study and how it was performed. So you're challenging me. I'm going to go back and read it today. But I do think it's a really good point that the amount of total activity is going to increase if we're able to use it. So it all depends on whether we're using the orthotic to keep moving. And if we didn't have it, if we were to not move at all, I think that's the case for, it's probably going to maintain, if not improve, the foot health, because we're at least adding that load to it. If pain was not part of the equation and we compared two people that are walking the same amount of steps with orthotic versus without orthotic, we're going to see more benefit of the person without the orthotic. That's kind of my general takeaway, is like, if the orthotic is what's going to keep you moving, let's do it. And that's the same with my patients. I peel them back in layers. A lot of them come in, like to your point, saying, should I get rid of my orthotic? And I'm like, not yet. I don't want to move too many pieces out of the puzzle at the same time. So I want to work on this and this. And then once we start building up tolerance, because here's the other part. We saw all the muscles in the foot, right? Let's say, for example, similar to wearing orthotics for 10 years, let's say I haven't been to the gym in 10 years. Am I going to go in on day one and deadlift 200 pounds?
If you're Joe Gambino, probably.
I would, yeah, 100%.
100%. 100%.
It's actually 400 pounds, not 200.
Part of the problem is people see, podcasts like this, or they read books or whatever it is, and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to be barefoot all the time, and I need to go run a marathon barefoot. Well, the problem with that is there's 4 layers of muscle in there. And to your point earlier, Joe, it takes weeks to build up muscle. We have to build up that strength. So with my patients that are in severe pain, I'm looking at, we need to build up enough muscle to start with to be able to not use the orthotic. to then continue building up muscle. So it's all about peeling back layers. And that's why, again, it's such an individual approach, because one person may be in that camp and another person may be like, well, I have orthotics, but I'm at home most of the time. I work from home. I'm barefoot all the time. So I really only wear them when I'm trail running or whatever it may be. That's a different conversation where I'm like, okay, your feet may already have the tolerance to not use them. Let's take it slow. Let's try out not using them for those activities and see how we adapt to that. So it has to be very personalized based on our activity, our pain levels, our goals, all the things.
Yeah, and you touched on that before with pain too, is that it's not a reliable indicator. So how many people were getting slapped with an orthotic or, hey, this is going to alleviate your pain or eliminate your pain, and then it only reduces it slightly, which I think most of our treatments are probably pretty effective at doing that. And then now you have that mindset of, well, okay, I have the orthotic. I'm so delicate. I still have pain. Oh my God, my foot must be really messed up. My joint must be really messed up. So I probably have to limit those more and more and more. So yeah, I think that message is really worthwhile to get out there. And I think you guys are doing a great job with it.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one word that's not allowed in my office, and that is bad. You don't have a bad foot. You don't have a bad knee. Like I stop people in their tracks and I'm like, stop it right now. I'm
Mhm.
like, you have one side that needs more help, that needs more focus right now. Or whatever we want to phrase that is. And I read the person and their personality to come up with an insert phrase here. But bad is, we're getting rid of that
Mm,
one.
yeah. I like it because I definitely think language and the way we talk about ourselves can
Yeah.
play into
It
the pain
becomes an
response.
identity. That's the
Yeah,
problem is once your pain becomes an identity, you're never going to get rid of it until you believe you can break through that identity.
I agree. I want to go back a little bit just to the shoe wear because you talked about the wide toe box and you also mentioned as you were talking about orthotics, flat feet, not flat feet, but like I don't know where I was going with that, but as far as shoe wear goes, we talked about the wide toe box. The barefoot stuff was what we were
Yes.
talking about. When it comes to like going to like more barefoot stuff, I know there's a huge push towards that direction. I think it's kind of eased up now, but what other things besides a wide toe box, like should someone go to like barefoot shoes? What other criteria should people be looking for when it comes to shoe wear?
Great question. So, when it comes to what I would call functional footwear, there's several criteria that we're looking at. Wide toe box is non-negotiable across the board. Okay. Everything else exists on a spectrum. So there's like kind of like you were saying earlier, I like the word ecosystem, right? There's multiple different kind of levers that we can pull with this. So let's talk about stack height first, because that's a big one we get a lot of questions on is like stack height or cushion. So this is a shoe that has more cushion. It's still a shoe that has that nice wide toe box that allows the toes to splay. So this, which is a ultra, I think this is the forward via. So ultra forward via versus this shoe that also has a lot of cushion, but has a tapered toe box. I am going to pick this shoe over this shoe 100% of the time. Okay. But now let's talk about cushion. So when it comes to cushion, there's a couple of things to consider. Cushion can be comfortable in the short term. So it makes it feel like you're walking on a cloud. That's wonderful. However, cushion increases the amount of distance between you and the ground. It's a little bit more unstable. It decreases your sensory acuity. So we can't feel the ground as much, which makes us more unstable. So someone who has a history of ankle sprains, I may not put in a shoe that's this high, right? Another thing that comes with that, and this is a little bit indirect because it has more to do with the lift of the toe here, so the toe rocker. But when a shoe has toe rocker, it decreases the amount of work we have to do to push off because the rocker helps us push off. Similar to our conversation before, you can infer that us doing less work means that over time, we're going to weaken the foot because essentially, if we don't use it, we lose it, right? However, again, the tool for the job. So if I want to run very fast, this can be a tool to help me do so. It can help me rocker. It can make me more comfortable while I'm running, things like that, versus a shoe like this. So now we're looking at a Vivo barefoot. So this is when we talk about minimalist or barefoot footwear. This is a classic example of this shoe is there's just there to protect you. It's got this wide toe box. There's no cushion whatsoever. I think the total outsole on this is like 5-ish millimeters. So it's really just there to protect you from the scary stuff, right? This shoe, your foot has to do the work. It has to propel forward. It's going to make your foot work harder, which I believe the study from Sarah Ridge, walking in minimalist footwear, it was something like 16 weeks. I'm forgetting if it was 12 or 16 weeks. You can strengthen your foot by walking in minimalist footwear. Nothing else. It was like they looked at exercise, they looked at walking in minimalist footwear, and then they looked at nothing. Exercise and walking in minimalist footwear strengthened your foot the same. Now, I would love to see that study repeated where they did both. But, right, we can strengthen our foot in a shoe like this because our foot has to do the work. But I have both of these in my closet. These are my shoes, right? I use them for different things. Most of the time, I am in a minimalist shoe. So my feet stay healthy. They have to do the work. I'm in the clinic in these. But I also walked around Tokyo for 14 days and went from an average step count of about 8,000 steps to an average step count of 18,000 steps for a period of 2 weeks. My feet were tired. I severely increased my load on my feet so that I needed some help. So I added a little bit of cushion. So I brought with me my shoe spectrum. I had my minimalist shoes for my days where there was less walking. And then the days where I needed, when I went to Disneyland and I was standing on my feet all day, I used a shoe that had more cushion. It gave me a little bit more help. So lots of things to consider. The only other thing that I would say is, if possible, keep it flexible. So going back to that conversation of rigidity, we want our feet to be able to bend and twist and move to maintain the health of our joints. The reason I say if possible is if we have things like severe arthritis or post-surgical things are fused together. Those are all scenarios where we need a shoe that's now a tool in the toolbox to help us move because there's anatomical changes. But for someone who still has the freedom of movement, use that movement to maintain health.
Love it.
That's great. That's really, really great. And it makes sense on then from a clinician and even patient standpoint to then think, well, what does this client want to do? And I think so often with the push for messaging on social media for barefoot shoes, I think clients are misinterpreting that they have to run in a Vivo or they have to run in something so flat. And yet the goal they give me is I want to go and run, the New York City Marathon and set a PR in my Vivo. And I'm like, well, that's going to be a hell of a process. Why don't we use a VIA or something like that might give you economy or a little bit more efficiency with your training? And I think that would help boost performance. And simultaneously, the flip of that is clinicians may be trying to force people into a barefoot shoe because that's what they should be in, without recognizing their goals. So I think it's really a two-way conversation of like, what does that person in front of us want? Is it performance? Is it comfort? Is it pain relief? And to know that there's a tool for the job, but those standards that you gave us that are kind of quote unquote non-negotiable, that would kind of fit into that foot health. So I think that's absolutely great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like, those two sides of the spectrum, you don't always have to get all the way to the minimalist, right? There are scenarios, especially depending on past history, depending on age, things like that, where I have patients that get to a shoe like this or a shoe like the Ultra Escalante, which is just slightly thicker than this, but it doesn't have support. It's zero heel to toe drop, so we're not tilted towards the toes. And it's decently flexible and it has a wide toe box. I'm happy, right? As long as we're doing stuff on the back end to make sure that we're, walking barefoot a little bit at home or things like that, where we do get interface with the ground. But you don't have to get all the way to the minimalist side as long as we're being proactive and still doing things to maintain the health of our feet.
Yeah. I will say, when the first time I was in those barefoot shoes, my feet killed me. This was many years ago. I could tolerate them now. I can run on them if I wanted to, for not very long distances. But Joe knows I don't run.
Neither.
But yeah, I learned very fast that you need to build yourself up, or like kind of like slowly increase your exposure to barefoot shoes when you're first getting into them. Because
Exactly.
And I had some friends who they did this is when I was working at the Matrix so many years ago. I had a couple of people who did like one of those like urban races through New York, and one of them wore minimalist shoe wear and like never really ran before and was like just new to them. And his foot was in pain for like 6 months after. So,
Yeah.
Learn those lessons early.
Truly. I mean, so many of my patients come in and their story starts with, I went on vacation to Europe and I was walking around, or I went on vacation and I was walking barefoot on the beach, and all of these things, I'm like, okay, so what was your normal activity before that? And then what was your activity during? And it's like we have blinders on to how much our activity changes on things like trips or whatever it may be. And they don't realize, like, no, you quadrupled the amount of activity your feet normally do. So yeah, they're angry.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think there's a lot of stuff to take away here. And I like that it's very usable stuff. So I don't know, Joe, if you have any more questions or not, but Jen, if he doesn't, I'd like to give you the floor to just maybe talk a little bit more about where listeners can find you, anything that you like to point them to that might be able to help them if they're dealing with foot and ankle stuff.
I do have one more question.
Dang it, Joe. No, I'm just kidding. What do you got?
It's a fun one. It's just a fun one. It's a fun one. It's meant to be fun. If you could take one muscle of the foot out on a date, which one would it be and why?
Okay, so nerd question. You say muscle of the foot, does it have to be intrinsic or can it be extrinsic?
I don't care. Jen, this is your question. You interpret it however you like.
I'm going FTB. I'm going FTB. That's this guy.
You literally have it right there.
I'm gonna take it out with me. I'm gonna put it in my purse on my next date night with my husband. That's what I'm gonna
It's
do.
almost like a comb. You could even use as a brush.
So it lives right on the bottom of the foot. When I talk about the trampoline of the foot, that is this muscle. This muscle is the one that has been the most studied. It's the one that gains the most strength when we're actually using our foot and propelling us forward. I think this muscle is the key to unlocking so many people's pain, everything from plantar fasciitis to Achilles stuff to obviously Achilles. We want to look at the calf too, just throwing that out there. But looking at hammer toes, looking at neuromas, this guy, that's my date.
All right. Very good.
That's
good
a fun
answer.
question, Joe. We'll just ask everyone that question going forward.
Whatever body part we're talking about. It's just like, what muscle are you taking out on a date?
I can say I have never been asked that question before.
I don't think I've ever heard that question before, so fair enough.
It just popped in my mind. Mine would be, if you want to know mine, would be peroneus tertius, just to be like, what's your deal, bro? Like, what do you even do?
I think it should be abductor digiti minimi, just because you get to say
I like the name. Yeah.
All right, Jen, you've been very gracious with your time. How do people find you? How do they learn more? Give us all the details.
Yeah. So Gait Happens is the easiest way to find us. Gaithappens.com, Gait, not GATE, happens.com. And we have all the resources there. If you are looking for free resources, again, our Instagram, our YouTube, our Facebook, all of those have lots and lots of videos. If you're like, just tell me what to do, we do have virtual consultations with clinicians on our team. We also have a brand new program, which is a 12-week Fit Feet program. So it's all about building your mobility, your strength, and your power. And it's 4 phases. So it's progressive. So it starts really foundational and then builds up to a point where you're really challenging your body. And it's really, really good. And it's our first program we've ever come out with in multiple languages. So it's now available in English, French, Spanish, and Japanese.
Very good. We will link that. We'll give people the route to access it. Jen, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Joe, you are a treasure as always. I love you.
As well, Joe.
And we love you. Listeners, we love you. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of The Beyond Pain.
Thanks, everybody.